They thought the Australian exchange student was normal. They were wrong. Official mission report. 3847B filed by Research Coordinator Vex'la, Velm'orn Science Delegation Joint Velm'orn Human Atmospheric Survey Mission, Planet Kethros 9 Mission Duration, 72 Standard Hours, Status. This report filed under duress. Initial briefing, Hour 0. The mission briefing room's reflective floor showed Vex'la's emerald scales in perfect detail as she stood at attention, her tail held in what she hoped was a professionally neutral curve. Her forked tongue flicked out once, measured, controlled, as she studied the holographic mission parameters floating before her. "You will work together," Mission Commander Thayer stated, his darker forest-green scales catching the sterile light. His broader snout gave his words extra gravitas, and the pronounced horns along his jaw marked him as someone who'd survived 17 combat deployments. His amber eyes, vertical pupils narrowed, fixed on Vex'la with what she recognized as sympathy. "The Diplomatic Council has mandated full cooperation between our species and humanity. This survey mission will demonstrate our commitment to the Alliance." Vex'la's scales lightened almost imperceptibly. Her tongue flicked twice in rapid succession. "Commander, I reviewed the human's credentials. Research Assistant Rourke graduated with adequate marks. His survival training is listed as Pohodi. I believe the translation error means beach Pohodi." "Beach walks," Thayer corrected, his own tongue flicking in what might have been amusement or resignation. His tail tapped the floor once. "Yes, the translation is accurate." "That's a bit harsh, yeah?" Both Velm'orn turned. Vex'la's tail jerked involuntarily. Rourke stood in the briefing room doorway, one hand holding a thermos covered in faded stickers, the other giving a casual wave. He wore board shorts patterned with small earth fruits, a shirt that proclaimed "no worries," and foam footwear that made soft, slapping sounds as he walked across the reflective floor. His sun-bleached hair stuck up at odd angles. He looked, Vex'la noted with her tongue flicking rapidly, exactly like his personnel photo, which she had assumed was a joke. "I've done heaps of beach walks," Rourke continued, dropping into one of the chairs designed for Velm'orn physiology. He sprawled across it at an angle that should have been uncomfortable, unscrewed his thermos, and took a long drink. "Built character and whatnot." Thayer's scales darkened slightly. "Research Assistant Rourke, welcome. As I was explaining to Coordinator Vex'la, this mission requires—" I read the brief." Rourke waved his thermos vaguely at the holographic display. His amber liquid sloshed inside the container. "Toxic atmosphere, aggressive fauna, geological instability, standard survey stuff. When do we leave?" Vex'la's tongue flicked 4 times in 3 seconds. "You consider that standard?" "Well, yeah. Bit of danger keeps things interesting." Rourke took another drink, then offered the thermos toward Vex'la. "Want some? It's from home." "We cannot consume," Vex'la began. Right, different biology." Rourke pulled the thermos back and took another swig. "Fair enough." Thayer's tail was now visibly twitching. "The transport pod departs in 1 standard hour. Vex'la will handle all technical operations and analysis. Rourke, you will assist with equipment and follow Coordinator Vex'la's instructions precisely. The success of this mission reflects on both our species' commitment to cooperation." "No worries," Rourke said, standing up and stretching. Several of his joints made popping sounds that caused both Velm'orn to flinch. "Should be easy as." Vex'la's scales had lightened to a concerning shade of lime. "Departure. Hour 047. The transport pod was designed for 2 passengers, barely. Vex'la settled into the pilot's seat, her tail coiling neatly beside her as her 2 arms moved across the crystalline controls with practiced precision. The instruments hummed to life, displays flickering with atmospheric data and trajectory calculations. Rourke squeezed into the co-pilot seat, immediately putting his thermos in the cup holder, clearly designed for Velm'orn measurement devices. He looked around the cramped space with apparent satisfaction. Cozy. "Please do not touch anything," Vex'la said, her tongue flicking as she initiated the launch sequence. Through the transparent dome above them, the docking bay's angular architecture began to recede. "The controls are calibrated for Velm'orn tactile sensitivity. Human contact could—" Rourke had already leaned forward and tapped one of the displays. Every alarm in the pod screamed to life. Vex'la's scales flashed to pale green as her tail lashed against the side of her seat. Her tongue wouldn't stop flicking. "What did you—" "Oh, that's just the proximity sensor. Yeah?" Rourke reached over with both hands and pressed 3 panels in quick succession. The alarms stopped. "Had the same issue with the shower in my quarters. Just gotta reset the threshold sensitivity." The pod was silent except for the gentle hum of the engines. Vex'la's amber eyes, pupils contracted to thin slits, slowly turned toward Rourke. "The shower. Yeah, kept thinking I was too close to the water jets. Screamed every time I tried to rinse my hair." Rourke settled back in his seat, retrieving his thermos. "Fixed it after the 3rd day. You modified Velm'orn technology in your living quarters, without authorization." "I mean, no one said I couldn't." Rourke took a drink. "Besides, worked perfectly after. Want me to show you the do not touch anything else?" "Righto." Vex'la's scales remained pale green for the entire 2-hour journey to Kethros 9. Behind them, transmitted to the mission command station, Thayer watched the telemetry data with his tail, wrapped completely around his own leg, a sign of deep unease among Velm'orn. His scales had taken on a grayish tinge. Planetary approach. Hour 2:31. Kethros 9 filled the transport pod's viewport. A swirling mass of toxic yellow clouds, jagged continents, and what the scans cheerfully labeled as Class 4 atmospheric hostility. "The landing site is within acceptable parameters for the survey," Vex'la reported, her tongue flicking as she studied the data streaming across her displays. Her scales had returned to emerald, though her tail remained slightly curved with tension. "We will have 17 standard hours to complete the atmospheric sampling before the radiation storm cycle begins." "Heaps of time," Rourke observed. "The indigenous predators are most active during the daylight cycle. Our suits will protect us, but we must avoid direct confrontation." "Sensible. The geological instability means any tremor could trigger massive—" Yep, all sounds good." Rourke was looking out the viewport with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Looks a bit like the Outback, actually. Except, more murderous." Vex'la's tongue flicked. "The Outback? Desert back home. Hot, dry, full of things that want to kill you." Rourke grinned. "Good times. Your planet's environment actively attempts to kill you?" "Well, bits of it, yeah." Vex'la's scales lightened again. "And this is normal?" "Pretty standard for Australia." The transport pod shuddered as it entered Kethros 9's atmosphere. Vex'la's 2 arms moved rapidly across the controls, stabilizing their descent while her tail braced against the seat. The toxic yellow clouds engulfed them, and the hull temperature readings climbed rapidly. Rourke unscrewed his thermos and took another drink. "How are you so calm?" Vex'la demanded, her tongue flicking frantically, as another shudder rocked the pod. Ah, this is nothing. Flew through a cyclone once. Well, not on purpose. Pilot got a bit lost. Rourke watched the viewport with mild interest as something large and winged shot past, briefly visible in the yellow murk. Oi, was that one of the predators? Yes, a skrill hawk. They hunt in packs and can... Vex'la's displays erupted with proximity warnings. There are 6 more. They are coordinating an attack pattern. Can we outrun them? No. The atmospheric density and our current descent velocity. Right. Rourke leaned forward again. I said, do not. Rourke grabbed one of the control crystals and rotated it 90 degrees. The transport pod immediately inverted, flying upside down through the cloud bank. 3 skrill hawks shot past where they had been moments before, their screeches audible even through the hull. Vex'la's scales were now bone white. Her tail had gone completely rigid. That maneuver is not in the flight protocols. Yeah, but it worked. Rourke rotated the crystal back, and the pod righted itself. The skrill hawks were now distant, specks, apparently confused by their prey's incomprehensible behavior. They're pack hunters, yeah? They expect prey to follow predictable patterns. Do something random, and they lose coordination. How did you... Vex'la's tongue was flicking so rapidly it was nearly a blur. That crystal controls the gravitational stabilizers. If you had rotated it in the wrong direction, we'd have gone right side up instead of upside down. We would have inverted our atomic structure and ceased to exist. Rourke paused, thermos halfway to his mouth. Huh. Lucky guess, then. From the mission command station, Thayer's communication crackled through. His voice was tight, clipped. Vex'la, please confirm your telemetry readings. It appears your gravitational signature briefly inverted. Confirmed, Commander, Vex'la said weakly. Her scales were slowly returning to pale green. It was intentional. A long pause. I see, Thayer said, which was Velm'orn for, I deeply regret every decision that led to this moment. Carry on. Landing. Hour 3:15. The transport pod touched down on a flat expanse of rust-colored rock. Through the viewport, Kethros 9's surface stretched out in jagged formations that looked like broken teeth. The yellow atmosphere turned everything the color of old bruises. Vex'la took a moment to simply sit in the pilot's seat, her tail coiled tightly around her own leg, her tongue flicking methodically. The environmental suits are in the rear storage. We will conduct the atmospheric sampling in quadrants, maintaining visual contact at all times. Sounds like a plan. Rourke stood, bashing his head on the low ceiling with a sound that made Vex'la flinch. Ow, right, forgot about that. Are you injured? Nah, thick skull. Rourke rubbed his head and moved toward the rear storage, somehow navigating the cramped space despite being taller than the pod's design specifications. He retrieved 2 environmental suits and held up the one, designed for humans. Yeah, Houston, we might have a problem. Vex'la's scales immediately began lightening. What problem? This suit's got a crack in the helmet seal. Rourke showed her the transparent dome. A thin fracture ran across one side. Must have happened during the skrill hawk bit. That suit is the only thing that will allow you to survive in Kethros 9's atmosphere. Vex'la was now fully pale green. Her tail had released her leg and was lashing behind her. Without it, exposure to the toxic compounds would cause respiratory failure within minutes, followed by, Yeah, I read the brief. Rourke examined the crack, then shrugged. Should be fine for a bit though, yeah? How long's the sampling take? 47 minutes for the first quadrant alone. Plenty of time. Rourke began pulling on the suit. You will die. Vex'la's tongue flicked once, sharp and precise, the Velm'orn equivalent of emphasis. I am stating this clearly. You will die. Probably not. I've got good lungs. Rourke sealed the suit, the crack in the helmet now directly at eye level. Besides, we gotta do this mission, yeah? Diplomatic cooperation and all that. Can't let our species down just because of a little crack. Vex'la stared at him, her amber eyes wide, pupils fully dilated. A little crack in life support equipment is, come on, we're burning daylight. Well, toxic yellow atmosphere light. Rourke moved toward the pod's exit hatch. You coming or what? For a long moment, Vex'la remained frozen in her seat. Then, with her scales a color she'd never seen on a Velm'orn before, a sort of whitish green that suggested a complete breakdown of emotional regulation, she retrieved her own suit. Through the communication channel, Thayer's voice crackled again. Vex'la, Rourke's bio readings are, please confirm he is aware his helmet is compromised. He's aware, Commander, Vex'la said quietly. Another pause. I am updating my resignation letter, Thayer said. Surface operations. Hour 3:42. The moment Rourke stepped onto Kethros 9's surface, the crack in his helmet immediately began leaking a thin stream of yellow atmosphere. Vex'la watched through her suit's perfect seal as Rourke looked up at the toxic sky, took an experimental breath, and nodded. Bit acrid, he said through the communication channel. Like if you mixed bleach with battery acid and set it on fire. Please get back in the pod, Vex'la said, her voice climbing to a frequency that made her suit's speakers distort. Nah, I'm good. Rourke retrieved the atmospheric sampling equipment from the pod's storage, slinging the container over his shoulder. Toxic atmosphere was now definitely entering his suit. Vex'la could see the yellow wisps. Where's the first sampling point? Vex'la's tail was thrashing so violently it knocked against her own suit's legs. 200 meters north, but you cannot… Righto. Rourke started walking, his gait easy and relaxed, despite trudging through alien terrain in a compromised environmental suit while breathing poison. Vex'la followed, her tongue flicking uselessly inside her helmet, her scales cycling through colors that had no names. Pale lime, grayish green, a peculiar shade that might have been called panic blanc. At the mission command station, Thayer had pulled up Rourke's bio readings. His own scales had gone completely gray. His oxygen saturation is dropping. His heart rate is… No, that cannot be correct. It is slowing down. He appears to be relaxing, Vex'la reported numbly. That is not how poisoning works. I am aware, Commander. They reached the first sampling point, a rocky outcropping where the geological instability created small vents releasing concentrated atmospheric compounds. Vex'la, moving on autopilot, deployed the sampling equipment and began the calibration sequence. Beside her, Rourke unscrewed his thermos and took a drink. Through the crack in his helmet, the toxic atmosphere mixed with whatever was in his thermos. Rourke swallowed, considered, then nodded. Adds a bit of bite to it. Vex'la's scales turned a color that might have been clear. What, she said, her voice very quiet, is in that thermos? This? Just goon. Goon. Yeah, you know, box wine. Brought a few casks from Earth. This one's a nice shiraz, bit fruity, decent tannins. Rourke took another drink, toxic atmosphere audibly mixing with the liquid. Want some? Oh wait, different biology. Shame. You are drinking fermented agricultural product, while breathing Class 4 toxic atmosphere, through a compromised environmental suit. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds bad. The sampling equipment beeped. Vex'la stared at it, then at Rourke, then back at the equipment. Her tail had stopped moving. Her tongue had stopped flicking. She had entered a state beyond panic, into a realm of pure acceptance that the universe made no sense. Sample collected, she said distantly. Quadrant 2 is 400 meters east. Beauty. Rourke secured his thermos and picked up the equipment container. Race you? Humans cannot outrun Velm'orn. Yeah, but you're wearing a bulky suit, and I've got the power of a good shiraz. Rourke grinned through his cracked helmet, toxic atmosphere swirling around his face. Bet you a... The ground beneath them exploded, not figuratively. A geological vent erupted between them, sending superheated rock and toxic gas 50 meters into the yellow sky. Vex'la was thrown backward, her suit's stabilizers kicking in automatically to prevent damage. She landed in a controlled roll, her tail deploying as a counterbalance. Rourke simply stumbled, dropped his thermos, caught it before it hit the ground, and took another drink. Bloody hell, he said mildly. Nearly lost the shiraz. Through the communication channel, Thayer made a sound that had no translation in any language. Vex'la slowly got to her feet. Through her suit's helmet, she watched Rourke standing in the settling dust and debris, surrounded by toxic atmosphere, drinking wine through a cracked environmental seal, apparently unbothered by the volcanic eruption that had just occurred between them. Commander Thayer, she said quietly. Yes, Coordinator Vex'la? I am updating my own resignation letter. Understood. Rourke wandered over, stepping around the still glowing rocks. So, Quadrant 2, yeah? Should probably hurry. Looks like the geological activity is picking up. Vex'la looked at him, then at the volcanic vent, then at his thermos. Yes, she said, her voice hollow. Let us hurry. As they walked toward the second sampling point, Rourke pointed at a pack of skrill hawks circling overhead. Reckon those ones can smell the wine? They're getting pretty close. They are likely attracted to the unusual atmospheric disturbance, Vex'la said automatically, her scientific training engaging despite her complete psychological breakdown. Or possibly confused by your continued survival. Fair enough. Rourke waved at the skrill hawks. One of them screeched and flew away. Did you just... Vex'la's tongue tried to flick and gave up halfway through. Did that predator flee from you? Dunno. Maybe it's not hungry. Skrill hawks are always hungry. It is their defining characteristic. They will attack anything that moves. Huh. Rourke took another drink. Well, I am moving, and it's not attacking, so maybe the data's wrong. Vex'la made a sound that was not technically screaming, but was close. At the mission command station, Thayer had placed both of his arms over his snout, the Velm'orn gesture of despair. They reached Quadrant 2. Vex'la deployed the sampling equipment with shaking hands, technically shaking arms, since Velm'orn had different skeletal structure, but the translation captured the essence. The equipment hummed to life, beginning its analysis of the atmospheric composition. 17 minutes until completion, Vex'la reported. Rourke sat down on a nearby rock, thermos in hand, looking perfectly comfortable despite breathing poison in a hostile alien environment during a period of increasing geological instability while being circled by apex predators. Nice view, he commented. Vex'la looked at the jagged rock formations, the yellow toxic sky, the distant eruptions, and the circling predators. Yes, she said emptily. Lovely. Her scales had achieved a color that Velm'orn medical science would later classify as human exposure syndrome, acute. The sampling equipment beeped. Analysis complete. Quadrant 3, Vex'la said. Righto. Rourke stood, brushing dust off his compromised environmental suit. You know, I'm really enjoying this mission. Good to get out of the station for a bit. Somewhere in Mission Command, Thayer was writing very fast. The sampling equipment had developed what Vex'la's technical readouts called a critical malfunction, and what Rourke called a bit of a wobble. The device sat between them on the rust-colored rock, emitting a high-pitched whine and occasionally sparking. The atmospheric density sensors have failed, Vex'la reported, her scales now a permanent shade of grayish-green that suggested complete emotional exhaustion. Her tail lay limp behind her. Without them, we cannot complete the survey. We must abort the mission and return to… Nah, I can fix it. Rourke set down his thermos and picked up the device, which immediately sparked and shocked him hard enough that Vex'la's suit sensors detected the electrical discharge. Rourke didn't drop it. That was 4,000 volts, Vex'la said distantly. Yeah, tingles a bit. Rourke shook his arm, then began prying open the device's casing with his bare hands. See, the problem is the humidity seal's corroded. Just gotta bypass the secondary circuit and… He pulled out a component that Vex'la's 17 years of technical training identified as absolutely essential. Don't need this bit. That is the core processor. Is it? Rourke examined it, shrugged, and tossed it over his shoulder. It clattered away into the rocks. He stuck his hand directly into the device's exposed circuitry. The sparking intensified. Rourke's hair stood up from the electrical current. Through the crack in his helmet, toxic atmosphere poured in around his face as he concentrated. There we go. He pulled his hand out and closed the casing. The device's whine stopped. Its display flickered, then showed perfect readings. Good as new. Vex'la stared at the device, then at Rourke, then at where he'd thrown the absolutely essential core processor. Commander Thayer, she said quietly into her communication channel. I am no longer accepting updates, Thayer replied. His voice had the quality of someone who had achieved enlightenment through suffering. Simply complete the mission. The sampling. Equipment beeped cheerfully. Analysis complete, and more accurate than the previous 2 samples. 3 more quadrants, Vex'la said emptily. Quadrant 4, hour 5:41. The bridge across the ravine collapsed under Rourke's weight. He fell for exactly 1 second before his arm shot out and grabbed the edge. He hung there 20 meters above toxic gas and jagged rocks, holding his thermos in his other hand. Well, that's not ideal, he commented. Vex'la extended both arms down to him. Grab on. Can you hold my weight? Unknown. Grab on anyway. Rourke handed her his thermos. Don't spill it. What? Using his free arm, Rourke swung himself sideways, got 1 foot onto a small outcropping, and pushed himself up and over the edge. He rolled twice and stood up, dusting himself off. Cheers for the catch, he said, retrieving his thermos. Sampling point should be just ahead. Vex'la remained on the ground, her tail wrapped around her own torso, her tongue flicking so. Rapidly, it was vibrating. You fell into a ravine and climbed out while holding wine. Wasn't gonna waste good shiraz. Rourke took a drink. You all right? You're looking a bit pale. I am experiencing the biological precursor to system failure. Want to sit down? I want to complete this mission and never leave my quarters again. They completed the 4th quadrant sample in silence, except for the sound of Rourke drinking and the distant rumble of geological instability. Quadrant 5. Hour 6:29. The final sampling point sat at the peak of a rock formation surrounded by active volcanic vents, circled by 12 skrill hawks, during what Vex'la's instruments identified as the beginning of the radiation storm cycle. We can estimate the atmospheric composition from the other 4 samples, Vex'la said quickly, her tail already turning back toward the transport pod. Nah, we've come this far. Rourke handed her his thermos. Hold this. I'll run up, grab the sample, and run. Back. 30 seconds. The skrill hawks will attack anyone who... Rourke was already running. Vex'la watched, thermos in her 2 arms, as the human sprinted directly toward the most dangerous location on Kethros 9. The skrill hawks immediately dove toward him, screeching. Rourke looked up at them, waved, and shouted something that Vex'la's translator rendered as, "G'day, birds!" The lead skrill hawk pulled up short, clearly confused. Rourke reached the peak, deployed the sampling equipment one-handed while toxic atmosphere poured through his helmet crack, waited exactly 17 seconds, grabbed the device, and sprinted back. The skrill hawks circled once, decided this was too weird, and flew away. Got it! Rourke returned, only slightly winded. He retrieved his thermos. See? Easy as. Vex'la's jaw had locked open, mandibles fixed in a position of absolute shock. You all right? Rourke peered at her. Your color's gone all transparent. I have transcended fear, Vex'la whispered. I am now experiencing something beyond terror. Need a minute? I need a decade. Should probably head back before that radiation storm hits, yeah? Through the communication channel, Thayer's voice emerged. Samples collected? All 5 quadrants, Commander, Vex'la said numbly. Complete data set. Of course it is, Thayer said. Return to base. Return journey, hour 8:52. The transport pod lifted off just as the radiation storm reached full intensity. Vex'la piloted them through the chaos with mechanical precision. Beside her, Rourke had finally finished his thermos. Good shiraz, he commented. Might open the Chardonnay next mission. There will be no next mission, Vex'la said flatly. Oh, come on. We make a good team. We make a team that violates physics, probability, and my understanding of biological possibility. Yeah, but we got the job done, Rourke grinned. Full data set? Nobody died? You should have died 17 times. But I didn't, so the calculations were wrong, yeah? Vex'la's tongue flicked once, the Velm'orn equivalent of hysterical laughter. Yes, everything I know is wrong. The universe is chaos. Bit dramatic, mate. They broke through into peaceful space. The station grew larger in the viewport. Vex'la's scales very, very slowly began returning to emerald. Mission debrief. Hour 11:30. Commander Thayer stood in the docking bay as they emerged. His darker forest green scales had gained several new gray patches. His tail was wrapped so tightly around his leg it cut off circulation. Report, he said simply. Mission successful, Vex'la reported, tail dragging. All 5 samples collected. Data quality exceeds standards. No casualties. Thayer's amber eyes moved to Rourke, who still wore his cracked helmet. You breathed Class 4 toxic atmosphere for 6 hours. Bit less, actually, Rourke corrected. Maybe 5.5. You fell into a ravine? Briefly. You approached apex, predators during a radiation storm. They seemed friendly. Thayer's tail slowly unwrapped and fell limp. I am transferring you both to the Deep Space Mineral Survey Program. A different assignment? Vex'la's scales lightened with hope. Yes, 6-month missions. Isolated asteroid fields. Just the two of you. Thayer's tongue flicked once, dry amusement mixed with revenge. The council was very impressed. They have requested you remain partnered for all future joint operations. Vex'la's scales went white-green again. "Aw, that's great," Rourke beamed. "Told you we made a good team." 6 months, Vex'la whispered. "In deep space," Thayer confirmed. "Just the two of us. The council insists." Vex'la looked at Rourke, who was already pulling out another thermos labeled Chardonnay. Her scales achieved a color that medical staff would later photograph for textbooks. "When do we leave?" she asked hollowly. 3 days. As they walked toward decontamination, Rourke unscrewed his new thermos. 6 months is plenty of time to really bond as colleagues. "Yes," Vex'la said distantly. "Bond or murder. That's the spirit." Behind them, Thayer began updating his resignation letter. Again,